Welcome to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws, the podcast that cuts through the rubbish to explore the world of neurodiversity. I'm your host, Nic King.
And I'm your host, Kate Fox, and together we're here to explore, understand and celebrate being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. From ADHD and autism to dyslexia and other quirky brains, we talk about it all.
And go off on tangents. So whether you're neurodivergent, love someone who is, or you're just curious about neurodivergent minds, you are in the right place.
Let's get ready to juggle some words and maybe even a few chainsaws, metaphorically, of course.
Hello and welcome to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws with me, Kate Fox, and her, Nic King. Today we are going to be talking about silence. And I wanted to do a shh noise then, but actually saying shh is in no way the point of the silence, apart from anything else. Saying shh isn't silent and just indicates to be quiet. Anyway, the reason we're doing this is I have just come back from a silent retreat. We were silent on this Buddhist retreat from 8 a.m. on the Sunday morning until 3 p.m. on the Thursday afternoon. Now, you see, I can see Nick's face through the Zoom miracle, and I'm seeing a reaction, and it's interesting because people have different reactions to that thought. So, Nick, what if someone said to you, that's the plan, that's what's going to happen, how would that be for you?
I'm not sure I could get through like 15 seconds of silence. I don't have the opportunity either, so I've never checked. But like the idea of hours of silence, I think I can hear my tinnitus right now. Like I can hear the silence.
Oh, the silence is too loud for you, basically. Steve.
Possibly. The silence is possibly too loud for me. I think it's so far from my life, my reality, that I actually struggle to conceptualize that amount of quiet.
That's really interesting because so for me, my initial reaction was very positive. It was like, bring it on. And then as the time got nearer, I heard that apparently the teacher of the retreat had said that a lot of the people who might dread the silence, in her experience, will go on to really love it. But then that raised in my mind, oh, well, what if you were really looking forward to the silence? Do those people end up really hating it? But no, I did end up loving it. But I have seen the silence and my enjoyment of it, my reactions to it, my experiences when undertaking that silence in a group of people, as all very autistic. But I'm realizing, of course, autistic people may vary. and although a lot of it honestly does seem intrinsic to my particular neurodivergence, my enjoyment of it, the anticipation of it, kind of clearly it isn't. Although I did observe different neurotypes in that situation, and kind of couldn't help watching their reactions to the silence through a lens of different neurotypes. And I certainly did observe, I think, some other autistic people enjoying the silence. Well, no. The word silence, isn't it? A bit misleading.
I feel like almost we're having a conversation about Doctor Who and we're calling it the silence. Like I feel like there's been a crossover of points here.
Indeed, exactly.
I don't know how else you would frame it though.
Well, yeah, but as you said, your tinnitus would be very loud for a start, so that's not
silence. It's noisy.
Yeah. So the inside of your own body can be quite noisy, and actually, part of the silence I was looking forward to was being in a group of people, but not having to talk to the group of people. I mean, that was huge for me. So
that's different though. That's social isolation. You can do that without quiet.
Well, so much to unpack here because I didn't experience it as social isolation. In fact, it was lovely because I was with people and we were all doing the same thing, which was basically meditating 4 times a day, but without the talking to them getting in the way. And towards the end of the week, people became more comfortable with it because it was indeed the very definition sometimes early on of an awkward silence.
Yeah.
But then we would be sitting in the sort of main lounge area and someone would be sat on a chair, drinking some tea, looking out the window. Someone would be sat on a chair next to them. Someone would be sat on another chair reading, or people would just be sat on the settees, even facing each other by the end, but just sort of not interacting. And to me, honestly, I was like, this is autistic heaven, this. I'm in their company, but I don't have to think of things to say. And I'm not.
That's co-regulation.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, but how
And
often?
co-regulation doesn't have to be talky. I'm up for quiet co-regulation.
Well,
Quiet, not silent. That's slightly different.
yeah. Oh, okay.
I can see enjoying co-regulation. Sure.
It's interesting that the phrasing of it has changed the feel of it. Well, because for me, right, that allowed in a group setting, not having to talk to everybody, allowed co-regulation to happen. Because there wasn't what do I say? Or me, in my case, the ADHD part of me getting overexcited by going down an exciting conversational rabbit hole, which I did do once the silence was released, because I pointed out, because we were in a big kind of country house type setting, and across the week, sometimes you'd wake up and like someone was just not there. And because of the silence, this was not ever explained. So I was like, we're just in a murder mystery, and one by one we're being picked off. And clearly the best setting ever for a murder mystery would be a silent retreat, because like no one's going to be able to mention it.
Now
So
got some sort of Doctor Who like
exactly.
writers crossover going on here.
Exactly, totally. It was very the traitors / Doctor Who. And like I was so happy when I could eventually share this theory with people and became very excited and not co-regulated really. But okay, so co-regulation you liked the idea of. So when does that happen in your life?
I mean, possibly in a similar kind of way, in that, like, we do a lot of parallel play as a family, in that, we will lounge in the same room and do our own interests, be they sort of on phones, on devices, colouring, making stuff into rainbow patterns, like loads of things. That's nice. We can do that. That's a good thing. And that has blankets and chill. And I can see how that's a thing. And I can see how that's something that you don't have easily available because you live alone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas I very much do not live alone. And definitely not in silence. But we do a lot of co-regulating.
And so,
And if I didn't have that, would I try and find a retreat with it? Possibly.
because it was very, but it was interesting because so a lot of people listening, and I think a lot of people on the retreat with me wouldn't. I did think about co-regulating actually once we'd got to that comfortable place, and but actually a lot of people won't be familiar with that term or idea, and I think a lot of people will also resist or not do co-regulating, even though that's just a thing that unconsciously arises, because there are certain beliefs they have that mitigate against that. For example, this idea of people sat companionably in a room just doing their own thing all together. To some people, if they looked in, I'm kind of going to imagine, I don't know, a Daily Telegraph columnist looking in, going, look, this is the modern family, all absorbed on their screens, each in their individual world, barely communicating to each other. Eventually, language itself will die. Do you know what I mean? Whereas actually, you're like, no, we're co-regulating. Our somatic functions have moved into a seamless harmony of breathing and heartbeat together without having to faff about talking.
Yes.
Oh.
Because some people do find wordy words completely overrated. And that's even within my house. Obviously
Mm.
not me. But like other people who I live with find wordy words overrated. Yeah, but still I can't envisage silence. I definitely can't envisage silence as anything other than noise.
Oh, again, that's like that to me, that's such an autistic sentence then.
Yeah. Because it would, because I can hear everything. So no, it's never silent. Even if it was a country house, it wouldn't be silent. I would be able to hear the fridge still. I would like, mm.
There
And
was well, there's something about, I mean, silence, and again, it's while fully acknowledging there's still your own body, the conditions we went into in the actual meditation, these were as close as I've ever been to what my ideal of silence would be. So, and it sounded quite hardcore when the teacher laid it out. And I have never been in any setting before where what turns out my ideal conditions for meditation, for really going inwards were, which was basically, sit completely still. If you need to move, check 3 times whether you actually need to move, or is it just that you've got an itch or that your foot's a bit uncomfortable? And then she said, so this was interesting because I mean, some of this is very neurodivergent, unfriendly, potentially, although it did allow me to achieve silence. Anyway, if your foot's uncomfortable, is it actually going to drop off or is it just uncomfortable? If you need to, remove an item of clothing, do it at the start, kind of try to work out what your temperature is. Definitely don't do it later on. Breathing, don't breathe too loudly or heavily. And when you sigh, she demonstrated how to do a silent sigh and a silent yawn and to suppress a sneeze. Because basically the aim was going to be in the meditation, we were going to go deep, like a deep. And what you don't want is somebody next to you just going, because again, silence is very loud. That is usually what silence is like for a neurodivergent person often. And she actually said a phrase where I was like, yes, this is how it is. She said, if someone coughs suddenly, that can be like a thorn in your flesh. I think she was quoting a Buddhist text. Now we all exactly, you're nodding.
all right.
We feel
I'm not on
that,
board
don't
with
we?
the stillness at all.
Well, and it's
Uh,
kind of
but
unstimmy, isn't it? But yeah,
I can see that sort of being immediately drawn out by an unexpected noise, by a
yeah.
cough. And I suppose if you've all signed up to, that experience, well, I mean, you're old enough to give consent to being very, very still for long periods of time. And we're old enough for some of us to know that that isn't what's going to happen with Nick. Um, yeah. How was it? How was
But
silence and stillness?
so for me, it was the best conditions for meditation ever. It's what I've needed, it's what I've always needed but not had. And I would joke, I have joked, in fact, in the past to this teacher even, when I was on my way to Quakers once, I was like, yeah, I'm going to the Quakers because the Buddhists are too noisy. And that was true. Like it was, and at last the Buddhists were as quiet as I needed them to be. Once someone had actually, yeah,
Told them to be still and shut up.
yeah, yeah. And it allowed for us, I would say, a bit of an alteration of consciousness. But I think it did really interesting things for because I mean, I've recently seen the inner monologue that apparently, Nick, apparently some people don't have much of an inner monologue. Their mind is just quiet. I know we can't imagine this, but
No.
I've seen this sort of mind described as a wandering mind, our sort of mind. And actually, again, something about, but I think it was, if I'd just been put in a room with a few other people and told to be silent for a few days, yes, I don't think it would have worked. I don't think my mind would have quietened. It was because we were focusing on particular topics and having this intense meditation. And, we gave my phone in on the Friday night, didn't get my phone back till Friday morning. So no phone, no other books apart from the particular Buddhist books related to what we were looking at. That was a bit, it's a bit tortuous. I had to actually read the books for starters. I was like, there is no other material. I must read this material. And I wouldn't have done otherwise. But do you know what? My mind became quiet. And it was very interesting because I thought that was only possible. I've only experienced it when I've had COVID, to be honest, before, when I've had that quiet mind, when I felt poorly. I'm trying to think of any other situation. Sorry, no other situation ever. just when I had COVID. And I was a bit like, ooh, it was lovely. I mean, I'm not I'm not advocating deprivation chambers for neurodivergent people. I don't think that would go down very well, actually. But it was interesting to experience what my consciousness was capable of. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to support it so we can keep these conversations going, you can head over to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws.co.uk and just leave us a tip through our PayPal link. It's quick and easy and would just be a really lovely way of showing your support. Thank you. And then since I've been back, I've had to preview a book that's a brilliant book called Becoming an Autistic Therapist. And there's now an organisation for autistic counsellors and therapists. It's started at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think the person who started it, Max Murnau, thought there would just be, she said, like a couple of dozen who would join. There are now 1,500 therapists who have joined it. So it's really, I mean, this is a bit of a separate issue, isn't it? A future podcast, possibly, therapy as an autistic person. Anyway, but reading those therapist accounts, there was one in particular talking about movement and how important movement is for her and how often spoken language was just not her first language, and everything has to be translated into that, and for that reason often doesn't make sense. So when she was doing kind of dance and dance therapy, things made more sense. And actually, partly I wanted us to talk about this, the idea that spoken language is often not our first language. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, mine is. But that's not for all of us. That's not a thing. I'm a very, very talky autistic person. I very, very, very rarely lose language. Like, so rarely. It's, in adulthood, incredibly rarely. It isn't necessarily the first way I communicate to everyone. Even within our household, there is a lot of texting each other rather than speaking. But that's because half of our household, although one of them never shuts up, they don't necessarily like being spoken to that often. Did you do like body language communication at this retreat then? Was there a bit of like...
That didn't count as that. Yeah, people did, but that's not silence. Like, it is, don't communicate, at all.
Like pointing at cups of teas and biscuits, like, do you want one?
Exactly. No, like you wouldn't do
that.
that. So people became more, but I mean, and actually it was hard for people, particularly when, say, they're being served a meal and you want to say thank you. And actually, I think people were kind of essentially either thumbs up or hands together or actually just going thank you. But again, so to me, so I think you and I are different in that respect. I think I do identify, even though I'm a writer and a speaker for a living,
Mm.
I don't think language, words, it doesn't feel like my first language. I'm feeling like I'm having to constantly translate from another language,
Right.
which I suppose it's a felt language, it's a bodily language, it's some other thing going on in the mind, and then words often don't seem to describe what it is, but they've become a bridge, a way to communicate with people. Um, so um, but on the retreat, I noticed, and it felt a bit like when I've been at Artscape, the retreat, the annual retreat for autistic people, 250 people go, and you can wear a red badge which says, I don't want to interact with anyone. And that does mean the people wearing that badge do not want you to, smile and wave while you're going through a door. And I'd had to learn quite viscerally what that means to just be
No.
with people, but without doing all the social signaling. And honestly, what it has come to mean for me now is just relief, really, even though it's awkward if you, as happened one day, actually walking towards someone from quite a long distance, and I could see them and they could see me, and we'd come outside of the retreat centre for a walk. And I was thinking, are they? Because if they had acknowledged me, I would have acknowledged them. And they just put their hand to their lips, and I was a bit like, oh, okay. So actually, we were still communicating at that point. Like that was not silent, really. And
Are
to me,
these social rules like set out in some sort of document before you go? Because I would have been confused.
yeah. Well, and again, it's a bit like the Artscape thing, where it is quite confusing. Suddenly, you're like, whoa, there's a change in the social rules. But I would argue some of that is a potential unmasking. No, and they weren't let. No, and
No,
they were not
our
allowed out.
reading list. In fact, if anything, this retreat sounds quite stressful.
Because again, like to me, I'm like, this is my language, is what I was thinking, and everything else began to feel like an interruption, like it would be an interruption to have to,
To your flow state.
maybe, well, yeah, an interruption to, yes, probably an interruption to my flow state, but also to have to step into this language again. That's just not my, I don't know, words. I mean, words are useful now in this conversation, and to do this podcast, I think we would struggle with the
Without words,
innovative
yes.
silent podcast. Oh my God, that should be a thing. Imagine if that was a thing. Oh,
But should we like see how long we can get to? Like count people just sit here. I don't think I could get to 15 seconds.
but well, someone actually quite early before we went into silence, because we had a day of not being silent. Someone said, I exist through language, is what they said. And it sounds like would that be the case for you? You exist.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think, yes, that is probably the only way I do exist. It is my first preference for communication by a long way. I suppose there must be a level of body language there, because if I had to pick, I would choose to do video calls with people. I don't really like phone calls. But I don't know if that's more about me seeing their body language rather than me feeling the need to communicate with my body language, because my face, if anyone scrolls through the front page of any of my social media, my face does all sorts of crazy stuff that I don't necessarily always appreciate or know that's happening. So I don't necessarily trust my body language to communicate accurately, authentically for me. I would say 90% plus of the time, I do have spoken language that can do that. I don't necessarily trust my written language to communicate that for me. Somewhere between the dyslexia and like how many spoons it takes to communicate in that way, I don't necessarily trust that. So yeah, body language and written language, although I do use them, no, they're not my first. They're definitely not my first.
If if you had 5 minutes, like say, and you were sat on a bench.
I love how you like if you had 5 minutes, Nick, because it like
you probably
because
don't
Nick never has
have 5 minutes, yes.
Yeah.
But imagine if you did, right? And you were just sat on a bench. Could you what would happen for you if you were not interacting with another human? And what would you be okay in your brain without your phone or looking at something or
I tend to l- listen watch. So I was sat at a bench the other day waiting for somebody on my Todd. I didn't go into my phone. I listened to two people have an argument and picked a side. Um, that's what I actually did. I was at a train station. Fun times were had. And I'm quite happy to like be on a bench in a view. I'm quite happy to like be on a bench in nature, phone free is fine. But my nature thing is I tend to like the sound of water. I tend to like there to be an element of a nature noise to that because yeah, silence is no, it's not my preference of noise. It's not the
Mm,
absence of noise because there is no absence of noise.
mm,
In me, there is
mm.
the quiet places. We were watching that film, The Quiet Place, the other week. Um, there was a discussion in my household because two of the people in my household have vocal tics that they cannot control, um, and the other one couldn't be silent if their life depended on that. And in that movie, that's literally right.
Oh, be
And
dead.
we had a
Yeah.
discussion about whether I should leave them behind and go out into the quiet place on my own. Not with the cat, because that is also stupid. I had a huge rant about the cat in that film. Don't even. Right. Um, Generally, I had a lot of issues with this film. This is how these debates came up because I was just ranting about this film whilst it was on. Um, and like, yeah, there was a discussion about whether I should leave them because I do have the ability to be quiet. I just don't like it.
And it sounds like the only conclusion was you had to leave all of them, really,
It was
including the cat.
leave all of them or die with them is where
Oh,
we,
okay.
we came up to. I'm not disclosing. I'm not projecting my parenting.
Whereas, see, so I can't watch that film because it's too scary. And even I have seen the trailer,
Mm.
and that was too scary. To what the trailer where they're on the bridge, and then the boy makes a noise with his toy, and then everyone's like, "No!" The thing comes from the. Oh my God! Oh, sorry, I'm not watching that film. But actually, apart from the fact that you might get eaten by a scary monster thing, I think the premise of that film. Oh, what a lovely world! At last, at last, this is my place. Um, Actually, our teacher mentioned early in the retreat that she once went on a 6-month silent retreat. And seriously, I was like, whoa. And actually, this was interesting, although I think this is about co-regulation too, in a way. She said some of the other people on that retreat, and some were only there for 3 months, some of them, she never got to know their name, but she said she loved them more than, as much as she loved her family type thing, even though they never spoke. And then she would eventually meet them later on at festivals and things. And I just think, yeah. But I can see it's not going to, no, it's never going to work for. I mean, I think your reaction is making me think even more. I had a little fantasy I could run a silent retreat for neurodivergent people,
No,
but
Nick, you can't.
it would just be so, that would be very, but then there would be some of us like who would be,
Fair. I think there
yeah.
would be some people who appreciate it. I know as well. Like I think when you're sort of a self-employed woman, you see a lot of retreats that often have a level of silence, a level of meditation, a level of yoga, a level of we're doing quiet reflective practice for these 2 hours, and a lot of co-regulation. A lot of co-regulation. Um, and obviously, nothing new under the sun. There are huge religious orders that were completely based in silence, where you chose to live that every single day for your life or however long you were in that organization. And I mean, I'm glad you liked it. It's not for me, but I'm glad you liked it. Happy for you.
It did. It was a revelation, and just yeah, I suppose one size does not fit all. But as you said, I don't get a lot of that co-regulation actually living on my own. And that probably is quite in my marriage, I got a lot of that. We would be silent together a lot, and that was lovely. We would read together. In a subsequent relationship, we did not get a lot of silence together, actually. The co-regulation didn't, I was often
very cool.
It wasn't very cool. No. Or like, in activities, it was. In activities, very, very, very much. But it was harder to get that silent togetherness. And again, and actually that was a neurodivergent kind of mismatch, I think, in a way. What was co-regulation for them was not for me if it was non-active. So these are I'm glad that you've used that phrase. I hope it might inspire some people to read further about that, or talk to people further about that, or communicate silently and telepathically about that with those around them, whatever is their preference.
And anyone can come and co-regulate with us on the 6th of March at Gosforth Civic Theatre.
Yeah.
You can buy tickets. Come co-regulate with us. We will definitely not be standing in silence because, again, that's not really going to work out. We should maybe do a timer thing. How long can Nick stand in a room of silence before we're going to have to do it at the end? No. No.
Well, there are 2 minutes silent. Apparently, that's how much society can be expected to be silent for. 2 minutes is our limit normally. 5 days, that's what we need.
Or not.
Thanks for tuning in to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws. We're so glad you joined us today to explore the fascinating world of neurodivergence with your hosts, me, Nic King.
And me, Kate Fox. If our conversation sparked a thought, a question, or even a smile, don't keep it to yourself. Drop us a line at hello@neurotypicalsdon'tjugglechainsaws.co.uk or visit our website, neurotypicalsdon'tjugglechainsaws.co.uk, to write in. We'd love to hear from you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, consider leaving us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform.
Until next time, keep embracing the unique ways you juggle the chainsaws of life.